My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 32 years old. I work as a creative director for a mid-sized ad agency in Chicago. I live in a high-rise apartment that overlooks the lake, but it always feels a little too quiet, especially in the evenings. This is the story I've never told anyone. I call it, There Were Tears in Her Eyes, when she said, I have been alone for a long time. I met her during the winter pitch season. It was one of those freezing Chicago mornings where the cold seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I was running late for a campaign meeting, fumbling with a coffee that was too hot and a mind that was too foggy. She walked in like a contradiction to the chaos. Measured steps, clean lines, elegance in restraint. Her name was Evelyn Hart, new senior consultant, transferred from our Toronto branch. She had a clipped British-Canadian accent, like someone who once lived in London but had softened over time. When she entered the conference room, everything shifted. Not because she was the most stunning woman in the room, though she was beautiful. Dark hair tied back, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of storms. It was the way she held silence, like she knew how to listen before speaking. I noticed that. I always noticed the quiet ones. We worked closely for 2 weeks on a rebranding campaign for a legacy perfume brand. I led the creative. She handled client relations. She was precise, methodical. She never let her emotions slip, until one night. It was 9:30 p.m. We were the last two in the office. Our desks lit only by the ambient glow of desk lamps and the storm clouds that moved like ghosts outside the window. The city looked like a graveyard of light and fog. I looked over at her. You ever get tired of pretending it's all just work? She didn't look up from her laptop. Is that your way of asking if I'm happy? I hesitated. Maybe. She closed her laptop. The click of it felt final. She turned to face me fully, her face unreadable. I don't believe in happy, she said, almost under her breath. That night we didn't leave. Not for hours. We sat across from each other on the conference table like two strangers sharing a confession booth. She told me about the miscarriage, a fiancé who left after, the family that never forgave her because she never told them. I have been alone for a long time, she said, and there were tears in her eyes, but not the kind that begged for sympathy. They were the kind that just leaked out, quiet, tired. I didn't touch her, didn't lean in or say the wrong thing. I just sat there, because some moments deserve nothing but presence. From that night on, something unspoken settled between us. A weight, tension. At work, we were professional, efficient, but underneath something was growing, or returning, or being rebuilt from whatever ruins we carried inside. Then came the client retreat. 3 days in a lake house in Wisconsin with the leadership team. Everyone drinking too much, pretending to bond. Evelyn and I ended up by the fireplace on the second night. She had her legs curled beneath her, cradling a glass of red wine. Her eyes were softer, but something still held back. Do you ever wish you could just disappear for a while? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then, every morning, I laughed quietly. That's honest. She turned to me. You don't smile much, Daniel. I looked at her, really looked. Neither do you. She leaned in, and for the first time since I'd met her, she placed her hand on mine. Small, cold, delicate like paper soaked in rain. Then someone opened the patio door and the moment snapped. She pulled away, gone, like a ghost afraid of being caught mid-haunt. The next week at work, she changed. Short replies, eyes that avoided mine, calls that she took in the stairwell instead of her office. I knew something had shifted, but I couldn't tell if it was about me or something far older, far more internal. I waited for her outside the building one evening, under the amber glow of the street lamp. Evelyn, I called when she walked out. She froze, turned. Daniel, what are you doing? Just tell me what I did wrong. Her face softened with pain. You didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem. Then what is this? This? She echoed bitterly. This is a chapter 1. Don't trust myself to start. She walked past me, didn't look back. Weeks passed. The campaign ended. She got reassigned to a European project. She didn't say goodbye. But one Sunday morning, months later, I saw her. She was at the art museum, standing alone in front of a Mark Rothko painting. Red and black bleeding into each other like bruises. She didn't see me at first. Then her eyes lifted, locked onto mine. I walked over. "Funny seeing you here." She didn't smile, but her voice trembled. "I'm not okay." And that's when she said it again. There were tears in her eyes when she said, "I have been alone for a long time." But this time, she reached for my hand. We sat down on a bench across from the Rothko, the museum nearly empty except for an older couple shuffling past with a tour guide. Evelyn stared at the painting like it was judging her, or maybe forgiving her. "I didn't come here to run into you," she said softly, her fingers tightening around the paper coffee cup in her hand. "But maybe I needed to." I looked at her, searching her face. She looked the same, but not. There were new shadows under her eyes. Her hair was shorter. She wore a dark green coat with the belt tied too tightly, like she was afraid she might fall apart if she loosened it. "You said you weren't okay," I said carefully. She nodded. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist. I've been unraveling." "You want to talk about it?" She laughed once. "I don't know, but I'm tired of holding everything in like it's gold. It's not. It's mold. It rots you from the inside." I didn't speak. I just listened, just like I did the first time. She took a breath and looked at me. "That night in Wisconsin, I almost let go of something, but I wasn't ready. I didn't trust myself to let you see who I was when no one else was watching. I wasn't there to fix you, Evelyn." She gave me a tired smile. "I know. That's why I came today." We started seeing each other after that. Quietly, gently. It wasn't romantic, not at first. We'd go on long walks through the city talking about art, books, loss, sometimes nothing at all. We became two people who didn't owe each other explanations, and that somehow made the trust feel sacred. I found myself opening up too. About my dad's death from a heart attack when I was 19. About my brother who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years after a fight about who got what from the will. About the loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from pretending you're not. She'd nod quietly when I told her those things, like she understood the currency of buried pain. One night in March, snow still clinging to the sidewalks, we ended up in my apartment. She was tracing a crack in my ceiling with her eyes as we laid on the couch. "Can I ask you something, Daniel?" "Of course. Why didn't you try harder to chase me when I pushed you away back then?" I sat with the question for a moment. "Because I've learned the hard way that chasing someone who's running from themselves never ends well. I didn't want to catch you broken." She looked over at me, blinking like she was trying not to cry. That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. The romance came slowly, like spring, like light creeping back into a room after the curtains have been drawn for too long. The first time we kissed, we were standing outside a bookstore in Lincoln Park. A gust of wind blew her hair across her face and I reached to brush it aside. She leaned forward like it was inevitable. There was nothing fiery about it, just a quiet surrender. But life isn't a straight line. It never is. About 2 months into what I finally thought was a real relationship, I came home to find her curled up on my couch, knees to chest, staring blankly at the turned-off TV. I sat beside her. "What happened?" She turned to me slowly, and I could see it. Something in her had cracked. "I went to visit my mother," she whispered. I didn't know much about her mother except that Evelyn called her a shadow with good posture. Cold, judgmental, distant. She said she doesn't believe in therapy. Called it emotional self-indulgence. Told me I was weak. Her hands trembled in her lap. And for a second, just a second, I believed her. "You are not weak," I said, more forcefully than I meant to. She broke then. Full body sobs. The kind that erupt from the soul like magma. I held her for hours, and I realized in that moment, loving someone like Evelyn meant being ready to witness the worst parts of them and not flinch. But I did flinch, eventually, because I started to fear that maybe I was becoming her crutch, not her partner. She leaned on me when she was low, but when she was strong again, she'd retreat into silence. into independence that felt more like isolation. And something in me, something old and wounded, started whispering that maybe she didn't need me at all. One night, after a quiet dinner at her place, I told her that. "I feel like I'm holding my breath around you," I said. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I never asked you to stay, Daniel." I stood up, pacing. "That's the thing. You never ask. You just assume people either stay or disappear. No in-between." She stood too. "Because the in-between is where the damage happens. The guessing, the hoping, the waiting." We argued, harshly. Words we didn't mean, but said anyway because they were easier than saying "I'm scared." When I left, she didn't stop me. 3 weeks passed. I buried myself in work. I started running again. Dated someone I met through friends, briefly, emptily. But Evelyn was a ghost that didn't just haunt places. She haunted the way I felt things. Nothing had color without her. Then one morning I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. On thick ivory paper. It read, "Some doors open with silence, and others with pain. I'm sorry for slamming both in your face. I missed the version of me you saw when I didn't. I don't know if I deserve you, but I wanted you to know I never stopped wanting to try." No signature, just her handwriting. I took the next train to her apartment. She opened the door before I knocked. She must have been waiting. Her eyes found mine. "You came." I stepped inside and pulled her into me. I never left. We didn't fix everything that night. Life isn't a movie where one embrace dissolves years of damage. But we started again. From a place of truth, not fantasy. From pain, not performance. Evelyn and I began to relearn each other, not as curated versions we once tried to impress, but as full, flawed humans. We went to couples therapy. She still had panic attacks some nights, waking up gasping for air. I'd lie beside her and whisper her back into the present. She met my mother one Sunday afternoon. Evelyn wore a nervous smile and brought a small potted orchid. My mom, warm and perceptive as ever, hugged her longer than necessary and said, "I don't know what you've been through, sweetheart, but I'm glad you're here." Later that evening, Evelyn cried in the car. "I've never felt that kind of acceptance before," she said quietly. I reached over, laced my fingers with hers. That's how it starts. One new memory at a time. About 8 months after we reconciled, I got an offer to head a creative division in London. It was my dream role, strategic freedom, international clients, full creative control. I was hesitant to bring it up. "I don't want to put you in a position where you have to choose between your healing and me," I said one night as we walked along the lakefront, the skyline glowing behind her like a story still being written. She stopped, looking out over the water. "I think I'm strong enough now to choose both," she said, turning to face me. "But I have one condition." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. Promise me we don't turn our lives into another performance. I don't want to look like we have it all together. I want to feel it, even if it's messy." I pulled her close. "Messy's fine by me, as long as it's real." We moved to London together. Found a small flat in Islington with creaky floors and windows that stuck in winter. She started writing essays, memoir pieces. Her words were raw, honest, and quietly devastating. One of them got published in a wellness journal. She titled it, "The Man Who Didn't Try to Save Me." She let me read it one night, long after midnight, while she dozed on the couch, feet in my lap. The last line read, "He didn't pull me from the fire. He just walked beside me until I found the strength to walk out on my own." We're not perfect now. That's not the moral here. We still fight, still fall into old patterns sometimes. She still stares at windows too long when she's overwhelmed, and I still shut down when I'm afraid of losing control. But we've built something different, not from illusion, but from effort, from presence, from grace. She said something recently that stayed with me. We were sitting at a small cafe in Edinburgh on a rainy weekend trip. She looked up from her tea and said, "Some scars don't fade, but they teach you how to stay." That's it, isn't it? We're all carrying something, grief, regret, the ghosts of people we used to be. and we think love will erase those things. But real love doesn't erase. It includes. It sits beside you in the mess. It holds your hand in the silence. It doesn't flinch when the past shows up wearing your face. I don't know if this is the story of how we fell in love. Maybe it's the story of how we stopped running. From each other, from ourselves. But I know this. There were tears in her eyes when she said, I have been alone for a long time. And now when she says, I'm home, she means me. And I finally believe her.